Howdy, guys. Attorney Walter Hnot. Now, one of the big things that you need to know about this particular episode is it is a huge, amazing episode. And what's going to be happening on this episode is we're going to be talking about all the ways that the Social Security Administration could be utilizing groups and or people to essentially investigate, surveil, to keep an eye on you throughout this process. Now, in order to do this video, I actually had to reach out for an expert specifically on surveillance so that we could go through essentially security measures, how the SSA can tap into what's going on when you're doing your regular basic stuff, and how they keep an eye on you, how they go through this process. Now, I want to go through this real quick. This is going to be very specific to essentially CDR investigations, which are those continuing disability reviews. The bottom line is that some people do fraudulently collect Social Security benefits, whether it's through CDRs or perhaps, where they get discovered, or perhaps essentially when maybe they go ahead and, do some fraudulent act, like they're continuing to work when they say that they're not working, a parent passes away, and then a child takes over their benefits without notifying the SSA. There's all these weird little things that it could potentially be. But in order to do that, I have to bring on our security expert. Let me go ahead and get this thing rolling real quick. All right, good sir. Can you hear me okay? I want to make sure that they can hear you well. Can you hear me okay?
Good evening, Walter. Pleasure to join you this evening.
Excellent, good sir. So walk me through, and this is what it really comes down to. The SSA, they use different groups, top-notch professional groups to investigate people. But one thing I want to get right up front, I want to understand who actually investigates the SSDI fraud, who is partaking in it.
So the actual organization for SSA office is the Office of the Inspector General, and they are responsible for investigating possible fraud in the SSA programs, including disability benefits, also known as the OIG. They may investigate situations involving falsified medical records, misuse of SS benefits, impersonation of an SSA personnel, and other illegal behavior.
Okay, so that's a lot of things there. That's a lot of things that they have to try and focus on, a lot of fronts that they have to watch out about. Okay, so how do we pin this down as to who they're really looking for? Like, who's the driving force in all of this that's really created this push by the SSA to do these investigations?
So over the years, as it's been looked at, the real drivers for this are money and the truth in obtaining benefits. The Office of the Attorney General has reported from April last year through September, they've recovered over $88 million through restitution, recovery, settlement judgments, fines, and savings. Just a very large amount of money. Additionally, the report indicated over $1 billion in questionable costs with violations of law, improper documentation, unnecessary or reasonable expenses, and another $220 million funds could have been put to better use. So it's a lot of taxpayer and employee money that has gone into this fund that's been recovered. Additionally, I think we'll find in review over 88 million in fraud and improper benefits were referred to the United States Department of Justice for criminal prosecution. This includes Department of Justice referrals. The total last year for those months was over 115,000 total allegations, of which 85,000 were standard regular allegations and 30,000 imposter scam allegations.
Wow.
Very large numbers. Of that, 106 people were referred for prosecution to the Department of Justice, and 304 criminal indictments for criminal information and other violations of law connected to SSA fraud took place domestically in the United States.
So, okay, so what, I guess the follow-up to that is, what essentially is the process, or what is this fraud investigation like? Because this is a government agency. This is just like an ABC agency, CIA and FBI. They're doing it by the book. They're doing it by their spiel. So, what is this SSA fraud investigation?
So the SSA can also receive fraud referrals from the Office of Hearing Operations, their internal organization. They can obtain them from private citizens as well as anonymous sources. In fact, the SSA wants to expand their investigations of claimants into every state. Fraud cases, for example, can involve people who file multiple applications for benefits in different states. Likewise, many fraud investigations occur because individuals may be claiming disability benefits and concealing work activity. In other words, cash under the table or helping somebody out for unfiled cash. Another example of the fraud is lying about your physical or mental condition. All of these are examples, are good reasons to investigate a person filing for benefits improperly.
So, and I guess when I look at this and I think about, okay, well, how does this all begin? So where's the beginning point? Where's the origin story? Because, a lot of people that I deal with, when they're going through the investigation, a lot of them are wondering, like, what triggered it? What happened? So how does the SSA investigation usually start? And then, what happens?
Most people who are seeking Social Security benefits are not aware the SSA can investigate your activities. However, the SSA does not put people under investigation. Therefore, you need to know that if you apply for disability benefits, then the SSA could be watching you. Typically, after you file your application, it's the workers at the local claim office who will start an investigation. Workers at a local SSA office talk to people who file for benefits on the phone. Likewise, they may help you with your file application. They may call to ask you about your doctor's information. During these phone calls, if the worker gets the impression you are lying, then they may decide to start an investigation about you. They can also review your work history form or other forms and decide to investigate you based on your answers.
So, and I mean, that's scary because obviously, they're first up to bat. They're doing their basic initial application. The SSA person says, I don't know about this person, yada, yada, yada. And then all of a sudden they're under investigation. It does bring up the question why the SSA, like what would qualify the SSA to not believe that you're being truthful, and I guess what this comes down to for me, the important stuff here is, obviously the Social Security Administration hires people to check in and look into and create reports on people. So, obviously, they can spy on you, but what does that entail? How does that work?
The Social Security Administration has several tools at its disposal to fight disability fraud among Social Security disability claimants. One of the most effective is the disability application process itself, which is long, detailed, and ends in initial denial in most cases. Another effective tool is the CDR program, the Continued Disability Review, which you and I think have spoke of prior. This program aims to ensure individuals who receive Social Security disability benefits continue to meet the SSA's eligibility guidelines. A less common and less known method is undercover surveillance, in which the SSA uses more covert methods to root out potential fraud among applicants and benefit recipients.
Okay.
The investigations of suspicious claims through the use of private investigators is a tactic more commonly associated with private insurance industry. And while this method might be common among non-investigative federal agencies, it is known to happen. The SSA typically will engage in undercover surveillance when it has suspicions as to the validity of a disability application. For example, the SSA may believe you've lied about your monthly income or may have considerable discrepancies in your medical records to be intentional.
I think you made a really good point there about the crossover. The SSA is doing investigations just like the insurance companies, just like these other agencies and things like that. So, and I mean, this is the thing that, I think most people want to know about. How the hell do they watch you? How do they do that?
It's changed over time, but the most common surveillance methods are very, very first and foremost is how they look at your social media accounts. They'll look at your Facebook, your Instagram, your Twitter, your MySpace if you go back that far. And why would they do that? Because they're trying to show you're not telling the truth. They'll look at three more things. They'll continue to look deeper into your social media. They will look at direct observation. And then the third is to look at photo and video surveillance.
So, I mean, and Mr. Zimmerman always has great comments. He says, who's watching the watchers? I think he makes a really good point there. So, and I mean, what this comes down to for me is that a lot of disabled people are at this disadvantage of, basically not being able to protect themselves against potential spying behavior. So, I mean, this all seems like a very serious group of methods that are used to basically be used against a group of people who are already inherently incapable of defending themselves against them. So, all right, let's do this because this is going to help the people the most with these methods. Can you tiptoe us through the garden here? Give us the behind the wall look. What methods do they use?
Okay, so we'll start at social media because that's seems to be the most common. It's a first line of surveillance efforts, mainly due to the fact that it offers the investigator. Now, remember, these investigators, and we'll come to it in just a couple of minutes, but these investigators are licensed, well educated in their craft, insured, bonded. They don't have a stake in the game other than to prove or disprove what the concerns are by their client. So in social media, they have an opportunity to look into the applicant's private life that they would otherwise, or years ago, not have had access to. When surveilling social media, they're looking for behavior that's inconsistent with statements the applicant has made. For example, if the applicant stated that he or she had severe back pain preventing them from work, but then is seen in pictures skiing on vacation, well, that may likely ring alarm bells for the investigator. They can also link other investigative tools to identify family members, friends, celebrations, clubs, and other social media opportunities that photos or video display on their social media that the SSA beneficiary performs actions that are not consistent with the application or continued benefits.
Wow.
Very, very, very succinct. One of the concerns I'll mention is most of those photos have the ability to be dated. So if it's prior to the incident and the filing, they get excluded. If it's post-filing, they may be inclusive depending on what the photos represent regarding the statement of injuries provided to the investigator.
That can be tough because, they could always upload a photo that was taken 3 years ago. And then how do you prove that photo was taken 3 years ago? You get into that thing. But all right, so that's the social media. That's the online, how they snooker in and spy on you online. How do they do it in person or directly looking at you,
So as they hire these investigators, quote unquote, tail or follow an applicant who's believed to have lied on the application or towards the CDR, the agency will want to know whether the applicant is capable of performing certain activities that he or she would not be able to do if he suffered from that disability they claim to have had. The private investigator may park on the street that the claimant lives on, watch for activities at the home of the applicant, or in any public place, such as when they're running errands, going to and from work, engaging in social activities, among others. But most importantly, a good investigator should be able to create his or her gray man or gray woman program.
All right. What is gray man or gray woman? I've never heard that before. What is that?
Yeah, it's a craft term. A gray man or woman is a person who can blend in with the crowd and be easily overlooked, unnoticed, and forgotten. It's used for personal protection details and surveillance. And this allows the investigator to move freely in otherwise difficult surroundings. It's also known as a method of camouflage and disguise that can be used with or without any additional props. And the key to becoming invisible is to be unnoticed. And the best way to be unnoticed is to look like everybody else. To blend in with a crowd, dress like an average member of the group. Depending on where you are, this could change. And the clothes that you wear to church are different than the clothes you may or may not wear to work out, go to work, or go to a bar.
So what you're saying is, I mean, they got to be, there could be anybody in incognito who essentially is watching them. It could even be multiple people potentially if it was a big enough fraud hit where they were trying to really go after this person. So, I mean, how bad does this thing get? I mean, how many people are we talking about? How does this work?
So can there be multiple investigators? Yes. The short answer is yes. And let's use the example of that snow skiing. You may have one investigator recording you loading the car at your home, or your friend's home, or a family member's home, putting luggage in the trunk, maybe standing on a ladder to put skis on the top of the car. Another investigator waiting for you at the ski lodge. Ski lodge? Yes, you have season passes. And oh yes, how'd they find that out? Through a family member's photo on their social media, and then in a few other postings, you appear at the ski resort. Moving on, that investigator records at the ski lodge, records you getting everything out of your car and off the roof and onto the ski lift with all your skis and gear on. So you ride to the top of the mountain with your family, and the third investigator is waiting at the top. When you get off that lift and start down the slope skiing with you and yours, that's all recorded by the investigator at the top of the slope. But by the time you make your leisurely ski run back to the lodge, the investigator who was there when you arrived at the resort is there now when you get off the lift. What's changed? Well, that investigator completely changed their clothing and accessories and is still unrecognizable to you and is waiting for your entrance into the bar or restaurant at the lounge. How do they know it was your favorite place to drink and dine? Well, your ski club posted it on social media with you in several photos of the last time you were there. And the lodge bar thought so much of you and your ski club, they printed out some of those group photos. They're proudly displayed by the hostess station and the menu board posted outside the lodge. The investigators will rotate through your actions while covertly recording you. This could include you reloading your car to go home and you unpacking the car once you arrive back at your home. Moral of the story, it can happen anywhere at any time.
So, okay, so let's say, and here's the thing where my brain is going with this. I know legally, you look at essentially the FBI, the marshals, you look at the sheriffs, police officers, they all have restrictions, what they can do, how they can search, stuff like that, how they can investigate, certain restrictions, and they're not allowed to do everything and anything that they can against the general public. You're talking about investigators. And I mean, I would imagine the SSA utilizes both, those that are directly part of law enforcement and those who are, I don't know. I mean, could they potentially use people outside of it? And is it even legal?
It's completely legal. We have to remember these are not law enforcement officers. They're licensed and bonded private investigators with highly trained years of experience, if not decades of experience. Many of them came from law enforcement. This includes from the federal level on down to municipal agencies as well as private security organizations. They've been trained how to fit in to any and all situations, regardless if it's protecting or escorting a VIP, government or corporate dignitary or executive. And that training could have included preparation and handling of security details for an entire corporate retreat on the beach, for a private getaway for a couple that need not to be disturbed for many reasons, including threats. These are outstanding investigators that just fit right in.
So, I mean, like, how does that, like, and I guess, when I look at this, I think to myself, okay, how the heck do you pick these people out? You talked a little bit about their training, and it sounds like they came from that world. They came from they were part of the government world. Like, how does that work? Like, all right, tell me about that a little bit.
So as they come out of different organizations, maybe they don't want to do the travel involved with keeping up with the dignitaries, the corporate organizations, that you're on a flight with a moment's notice and gone for many days for unknown reasons that you can't share with family or friends. You miss a lot of events. You miss potentially events for your children or for others that are important to you. And there comes a time that you may choose to do investigations that are less physically intensive or are surrounded by your community, so you're never far from your home, so there's not a lot of external travel. But as it becomes more prevalent, as we see celebrities, both coasts of the United States, Canadian celebrities, Australian celebrities, these A-listers pay a lot of money to have their privacy protected, to have their homes protected. Unlike some of the professionals that work in law enforcement, private industry has a different dollar amount that can be spent. Law enforcement has specifics, but definitive times for how long you work on that job before they decide to allow you to, I'll say, retire or move on. And these are the folks that move into these investigative positions. They're used to being on the beach. They're used to being in a black tie. They're used to being in a long gown if it's caretaking for a woman, and they fit right in. They know how to make this work. It's absolutely incredible training. Not to mention the driving training and firearms training and ransom and kidnap and escape and all these other pieces that come into it. Some have a greater skill set than others, but I think what it comes down to is, do they get the job done? They do. And it gives me the opportunity to move on, if I could, to the photo and surveillance side of what they do.
All right. So basically, we talked about them looking at you. We talked about them online with you. You're talking about photo and surveillance, like, they're going up there with a Nikon or a Canon camera, or maybe, like, I don't know, maybe even like something from the sky, maybe a plane, a drone, or satellite. So, I mean, how does the whole, surveillance with cameras and stuff, how does that work?
This is probably one of their primary 4 tools that they're working with. In most cases, when the Social Security Administration hires a licensed, insured, and bonded private investigator, that investigator will document their findings of photo and video, which they'll then turn over to the SSA to be used as evidence regarding their report against the applicant. In other cases, and many people don't know this, the SSA, outside of the investigator, may request video footage from establishments that the applicant frequents if it's available. We're talking about the gyms, the grocery stores, the retail stores, the pet shop, the big box stores, wherever it is that they go. Do they request it? Yes, and they get it from where you have been. And it's difficult. It's not difficult to get, but it's difficult to understand how willing people are to share that information. You go to the regular gas station, the regular coffee shop, you just don't know where that video is. Folks over in England know when they step out of their home, they can count on being recorded from the time they leave until the time they arrive back, and they do it knowingly.
It's crazy. Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
They're using it for investigation. Yeah.
One of the crazy things I'm thinking about while you're saying this is that I remember back in the day when I had a Canon still camera that had a little bit of video function, but you could take amazing photos with it. And the early purchasers of the Canon 1200 millimeter, like super ultra zoom lens, were like the CIA, FBI agency types. And BH Photo, or maybe it was Adorama or whatever, one of them got a hold of one of them, and it was just this massive piece of custom glass that goes on the front of the camera. Like the lens was just, it's just huge. The lens went on the tripod, the camera just hung off the back of it, and the camera was huge itself. So, but it can't be like that anymore. Like that was, you go back 20, 30 years with that stuff. I mean, sure, the photos were great using that lens, but I mean, what's the new technology that's out there, like past 5 years, past 10 years? What can we expect from the new toys? What are the new toys that are out there?
So the two newest and most up to date are at the disposal of the private investigator, and some of the technology advanced tools have really changed things. And most folks know it as GPS.
Mhm.
It's ground positioning satellite tracking. And the other one is the unmanned or hobbyist drone. GPS tracking devices have become incredibly mainstream globally. Apple products has come out with a tracking tag that is smaller than a United States $50 and are being used to track everything from luggage at an airport, children going to school and home, and placed around the neck of pets in the event they wander off and are not immediately located. Recently, we had an elderly neighbor report to us her dog had gone missing, and could I help her take a look around? And I reminded her about the air tag she had put on the last time the dog got out. And she checked her phone and found the dog sleeping behind her sofa. And crisis averted, and we didn't waste any more time with it. But Apple AirTags can track almost anything, anywhere in the world. They run on a replaceable, inexpensive battery, but there are a few caveats. They're not super helpful for tracking items in motion until it stops. And because they're dependent on Bluetooth signals from devices, the AirTags aren't the most reliable way to find somebody lost in a remote area. But again, of under $30 and a very reasonable alternative if you can get close enough to an individual. Some of the other GPS tracking devices are available at a very low cost, and they're small enough where they can be attached to almost anything in just a few seconds.
Wow.
Clothing, shoes, sneakers, bicycles, cars, trucks, just to name a few. Most are waterproof, have very long battery life, and track to within 3 meters in real time. But the investigators are licensed and experienced. They can also place GPS devices on a family member's car, a neighbor's vehicle, or rent a car if they need to. And depending on the investigator's concern, more than one device can be hidden on the same item or vehicle in the event one is found and removed, or by a random event that GPS becomes inoperable, battery problem, watertight, could knock off a million things. But again, very, very low cost. A secondary tracking device is not out of the question based on its low cost and monitoring.
So I know GPS has been legal for them to track people. I've represented people who've had stuff on the bottom of their car and stuff like that. I guess the crazy thing about it is that I've just assumed and I've even thought about that, getting one of those like little mirrors that goes on the end of the stick to look under my car and stuff like that. But to be honest, like other than a red blinking light, I really wouldn't know, other than me getting under there and looking, okay, there's a little electronic device. I wouldn't, and maybe that's something we should do a video on, like what these things actually look like. So, as a result of that, it's one of those situations where, it sucks, but I know that they can do that stuff. So I can only imagine a new thing that they're doing is basically, essentially this stuff with drone technology, like what, searching cars, being able to link a program in the drone to go ahead and follow cars. Like what happens with all of that? How does that work?
So interesting, just as a takeaway on the GPS and the flashing light underneath the car.
Yeah.
There are vehicles that will have them sewn into the interior of behind the fabrics and the seats and the carpet in the trunk under the spare. So some agencies back in the day, when all they would do is attach them and that blinking light was visible, they actually would set up cameras so as the car entered a certain area, it would be observable. Then it became remote drones, so nobody had to be close enough. And it just continued from the remote drone that would wheel underneath the car, scan it for electronic signal, look to see if there was anything blinking visually through the camera underneath without having to expose somebody underneath the vehicle in case the camera was kept there also. So just another piece. So when we talk about drones, it's a very interesting question, Walter. The tech on drones has gone vertical in both design, battery life, and capability. The price for most drones over the last 5-7 years has dropped significantly. And most folks, when they think about drones flying, are the hobby type or a parent or teaching a skilled child, maybe, for the most part. That's about the size I think most folks consider it being used. Some are equipped from the manufacturer now with cameras with up to 4K recording and memory large enough to record during the entire flight with a feature to rotate or change the camera angle operation on the drone, and it's controlled by the person flying it. When you talk about the big old lens on the Nikon camera, they're now the size of a walnut and being carried up on a battery with 4 blades. Some of the other features include flight stabilization to ensure both level control of the drone and greater video or photo quality of whatever was being recorded in flight, so you didn't have any jitter or blurry images. The design size overall has shrunk considerably on many models, making it easy to transport, set up, and use. The other benefit of the more compact drone is it's more difficult to identify in flight by those not controlling it or who don't know it's there. So although the sound from the blades may be heard by those near the airborne drone, very few people know what that sound is and where it's coming from and why it's there. Very difficult.
So, I mean, like, what is the new technology like when it comes to this? Because, I bought my dad a drone. He got his drone license. He did his thing. We took beautiful HD footage of the New Jersey farm. It was just incredible how it came out. But I mean, what are these what are these, I mean, they got to be itty bitty. They got to be like the size of bugs at this point. They got to be able to do, what are they like?
Well, those are outside the realm of most private investigators, unless there's some sort of funding behind it, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Most that are out on looking for SSA and working for SSA, their tools are their own, and they need to just follow the rules of ethics, morals, and ethics that go with the position, and make sure they're not violating anybody's rights as they do what they need to do. The new models are smaller, they're cheaper, they have full flight paths, they can auto return to the controller, be packed away in a package no bigger than, I'll say, a smaller camera case, almost like a small microphone case, or no bigger than 6 inches by 10 inches and 2 inches thick, and just put inside a soft foam container, and they're stored away. They're stored away. Where can they go? Well, that's a different story. Where can they go? They can go everywhere, absolutely everywhere, including over your home, my home, the person under investigation's home, his next door neighbor, his family, his friends. That drone can go everywhere, and it's legal.
So, I mean, what's I know the whole airspace thing, you own the land, but not the air kind of gig. I mean, what can people do about somebody that is potentially illegal? I mean, I know some people have pellet guns, a slingshot or whatever. They try and, throw something at it. Like, what's the rule when it comes to basically bringing it down or bringing attention? Like, how does that work?
This is probably as important as the CDR discussion for the investigators. Extremely important. Federal law in all 50 states currently prohibits a citizen from knowingly and willingly attempting to or disabling a drone in flight, regardless of its location, including over your home or property, and including if it's your drone. Keep in mind, this is a federal crime to shoot at an aircraft, including shooting at your drone, no matter if it's a firearm, a crossbow, pellet gun, and the penalties are rather severe. Some cases, penalties up to 20 years and $250,000 in fines. And just recently, the National Transportation Safety Board came out and said drones are considered aircraft. The same law that prevents you from shooting down a 747 or a Cessna 172 or something like that protects our drones while we are in the air.
So, I mean, and I get that. That makes sense because, essentially you don't want to be shooting at airplanes. You don't want to be shooting at helicopters. And, they're going to extend the same rights to those, even though it's creepy because, the drones could just, pop up, look into the window, all that kind of stuff. I mean, where does the line get drawn when it comes to recording you? Where does the line get drawn when it comes to being at a safe distance that's legal? I mean, because these things they can record at distance. So how does that work?
So a high quality drone camera can see 1,500 feet to a little over 2,200 feet away during the day. At night, drone cameras, I'm going to go to early last year's technology, and it's changed since, can pick up valuable images 165 feet away before it gets blurry. The distance a drone can see depends on the terrain, obstacles, the quality of the drone camera, and air conditions. One of the other features to be aware of is some of the drones have an automatic or crash avoidance. As the drone is in flight, it can avoid trees, power lines, antennas, and buildings in its flight path. These are just a few of the tech tools available to the SSA hired licensed investigators and other investigators. But it also, I need to share with you, it also could be the young kid down the street playing with his drone. That too is protected as well. But as far as coming up and looking in your windows, that's something where you're going to have to make a phone call to the PD. If you find that drone in your backyard and it came down on its own, you have an obligation to notify the law enforcement in your area. Go figure out who it belongs to for the most part, or you'll see people walking up and down the street looking for it. But this is not what we're talking about. We're talking about the investigators trying to obtain footage of his backyard, you in your backyard, or doing something you shouldn't be doing that you've claimed you can't do. The flip side of this investigation is whoever initiated it at the SSA was incorrect, got the wrong feeling, misunderstood the context of the words they shared with the applicant or the CDR, and it's unfounded. The investigator goes out and does his job and documents what he's done or she's done on multiple levels and comes back and says it's not what you're looking for is not supported, and here's why.
So, I mean, I guess the thing I'd be wondering at this point is, and I know about how long these investigations usually take. So how long do these investigations, give me the timelines here. Like, how long does the whole thing take versus how long do the investigations that are, internal with it take, like, where they're actually surveilling you? Like, give me a walkthrough as to timelines here. If somebody looks odd to a person who's disabled and, all of a sudden, essentially they're sitting there going like, that felt weird. That person felt like they were following me, like, and then 2 weeks later, same feeling. 2 months later, same feeling. How long would that last, that investigation?
So if it falls out of the normal process, which you're more familiar with than I am, you're looking at 5 to 6 months.
Yeah.
And again, if it feels wrong, it is wrong, but nothing stops a person from notifying law enforcement with their cell phone if they're being followed, if they feel uncomfortable, if they've seen somebody repeatedly parked down the street and it makes them nervous because of whatever reason they have to articulate. There may be somebody or something in their home that they're worried about, and that vehicle or person walking or person they've seen repeatedly is that threat. And have law enforcement, if it feels wrong, it is wrong. And the worst investigators don't get used again. That I can tell you. And that's anywhere.
Well, I mean,
you don't
geez.
hire them because they go, hey, I'm here to follow you. And how many times have we seen somebody on mass transit or walking down the street holding the phone in front of them and then ultimately walking into a bush or pull a sign because they're not paying attention. But what truly they could be doing is recording.
So, I mean, when I look at this stuff, you know, the first thing I'm thinking is, you know, they got a lot of tools. They can go online. People post stuff. They're pushing stuff. Also, Shirley, I always say the last name wrong in my head, but I will now pronounce it extra wrong. Benoit, Shirley Benoit. Thank you so much for the 99-cent donation. I really appreciate it. Let's see, Jamila Gary, thank you for the $2.99 donation. Love a little scary face and a little rock on sign. That's awesome. Very cool on the rock on sign. Now with that said, when it comes to, you know, what you're talking about, you know, people get caught. We did a video recently on this woman, you know, the daughter of a mom who kept getting a check. She passed away. She kept, you know, taking the check as if the mom was still alive. You know, we did a video on that. We went through the details related to that. What I want to ask you is this. All right, so give me, okay, I don't know if you know about that case, but give me a quick walkthrough on the case, and then all right, I want to flip it a little bit. So, because, you know, this is where my mind goes with this stuff, you know, devil's advocate. What if, what if I said to you, this person, the 128,000 when we did a video on, what if that and I don't know, if you don't know the claim, let me know. I can tell you about the claim, but what if you were the daughter? First, tell me about the claim, but then tell me, what if you were the daughter? How would you have gotten away with doing it and not gotten caught?
If we're talking about the same woman, this is the one that admitted to cashing more than $128,000.
Yeah.
And her dead mom's security benefits.
Yeah.
It was just a crazy story. Her name was Darlene Rogers, the daughter. She was 72, and she pled guilty to one count of theft of government funds. And it was investigated by the Office of the Inspector General, and then it went to the U.S. Attorney's Office. And the comment was from the U.S. Attorney Rachel Odd-Crow, concealing a relative's death from the government in order to keep receiving the relative's SS benefits constitutes felony theft, and individuals attempted to do this face going to federal prison.
Yeah.
As Rogers knowingly committed fraud by stealing retirement benefits that were intended for her deceased mother, according to the Inspector General for the SSA, and they'll continue to protect the integrity of the SSA and hold accountable those who defraud the programs. So this goes back to 1997, October 1997. Juanita Rich, the mother, had been collecting benefits until her passing in October of 97. Darlene, the Rogers, the gal who pled guilty that we just spoke of, didn't report the death to the SSA in 2009 October. She had been forging her mother's signature to gain ownership of the bank account for 12 years, using her deceased mother's checkbook to write checks payable to herself in approximately the amount of the monthly Social Security deposit. Wasn't until 2021 the SSA discovered that Juanita Rich had passed away and launched the investigation for deposits from October 09 to April 2021, in the amount of a little over $128,000. The defendant's sentencing is scheduled in this coming May at 10 a.m. There are some interesting pieces here, many of which have changed due to tech, as we just talked about. What could have been done? I think it's interesting that they charged this woman from 2009 to 2021, so a great deal of time, but did not charge her from 1997 to 2009.
Yeah.
So
What
the
happened with
question-
that? Yeah. I noticed that too. Yeah.
So the question became, did the statute of limitations expire, or was that a separate charge? And it's unknown because the release is not she hasn't been sentenced, and that may or may not come out. It would require us to search back to see how many counts. They could charge her with forgery, they could charge her with a dozen things, but it's unknown why those years were unaccounted for from 97 to 2009. But I think where things went off the scale is when she was writing checks out of the checkbook for herself in approximately the same amount of the Social Security amount. So if your check is for $10 and you keep writing it for $9.99, and every month you do the same thing, maybe the local bank doesn't notice, but there comes a point in time somebody's going to notice. And where it changed may have been either in the banking laws, if they were using the same bank. It may have appeared to a new bank manager or somebody in that banking system. Or somebody said, gee, I haven't seen mom in a really long time. Yeah, she's sick at home. And then finally said, boy, that looks like your signature. Or Miss Rogers got complacent and was making out the checks and signing them in front of the bank teller. Something you don't think about too much anymore with electronic banking. Speaking of electronic banking, my best guess is at this time or somewhere in the recent years, they would have asked that check be deposited electronically instead of by paper. And additionally, the death notifications have gone electronic. So the SSA or the bank or the estate, whoever may be involved here, would have received notification, and that would have put an end to it much quicker than it would have taken place in the late 90s, early to mid 2000s. So there's a couple of pieces that have been added in place to ensure that fraud is diminished as much as possible. But I don't think we think about the death notices, and I don't think we think about electronic banking. But here this woman figured out how to collect $128,000 over many years.
Very low tech.
Story. It was
very low tech.
Low tech, but it's just one of those things that when it comes out, it's a six-figure number, and it's a sad story. The woman, 72 years old, and could she go to federal prison? Depending on the circumstances, that's a possibility. Remarkably, at that age, she should be collecting her own Social Security.
Double dipping for sure. Yeah.
Just look. One of the things that law enforcement says is the first time is for need, the rest is for greed. That I don't know to be the story here. But complacency is the root of a great deal of what's unfounded, or they just get so comfortable with it after a period of time that they decide it's just okay, and nobody's noticing. Nobody's noticing. Kind of like the gray man or the gray woman. Nobody notices until it comes to a head, and or they do it poorly. And when they do it poorly, that's when it opens up a Pandora's box, and it may have happened here.
And this reminds me of a lot of things because, I've seen a lot of the drug dealers get more and more complicated when it comes to using computers, pulling out loans on behalf of basically, people who are hooked on drugs. And I see a lot of disabled people become hooked on drugs. And then these, bad tax accountants and these bad drug dealers basically find ways to financially take control of their credit and then ruin their credit, or take over their house, or take over their car, or take over their whatever. And, the bank account. And, from what I've seen, the SSA has gotten a lot better at finding these drug dealers who are savvy with technology. And but it takes some couple of years. To basically find it. But what always happens is one of the victims will have had enough, or have given up on life, and they're at that point they don't care what happens. And I think people are more willing to come forward in that situation. But the other situation, like the one you talked about, that's greed. $128,000 over that many years. That's greed. That's not need. That's continuous greed. They could have found some other alternative option than to do that. That's, you could say maybe, okay, they needed a portion of it, but that's greed. When it really comes down to it. We'll have to circle back and see what the court ultimately decides and, finalizes with that one. And do another video on it. But good sir, thank you so much for giving us an update on that. I really appreciate it.
Very good, Walter. It was our pleasure to be with you, and we thank you very much for allowing us to share some insight in the world of professional investigations. Many times through the years, we have found that it is not always what folks expected it to be, but they were satisfied with the results because it was handled professionally.
Excellent. Well, good sir, I will catch you later. You have a wonderful, wonderful night.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Thank you, good sir. Bye-bye. So guys, that was awesome. This is one of our, like I said, it was going to be a bigger show. It was going to be a better show than the usual show. And what we got to talk about there was essentially some of the newer technology that they're using to go ahead and find you guys and search you guys, etc. And what's scary about that is that, they're up on their tech. They're up on, how to use these programs online. It might be the second time that you've logged into LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter or whatever. Well, it's not their first time. It's not their second time. It's not their 100th time. So I thought that was really, really interesting. What I'm going to do is go ahead and basically, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and open up the phone line now to people who want to call in so I can answer questions for them. Try not to beat me up a lot tonight. And the reason why is, I'm just a little bit tired tonight, and I was late with the show, late with the other stuff. I didn't get to run questions with two of the claimants I wanted to run questions with before I had to come on here. So they're like, boom, on my list for like 8 a.m. But anyways, guys, bottom line, go ahead and give me a call at the 407-279-1754 phone number. Again, 407-279-1754 phone number. It is in the chat area. Where you can go ahead and see it. If you're on the TV, it's okay, 407-279-1754. And also, if you're seeing advertisements around this, just as a heads up, the advertisements are not for my firm. They're not for Disability Resolution PA. They're the big box firms or other advocacy group firms that, mass advertise to get disability claimants. They are advertising on behalf of, their enterprise to go ahead and basically try and get claimants through this program, which is ironic because I'm a disability attorney that represents disability claimants, but we're a very popular firm. So hence, they're trying to tap into that at this point. But just as a heads up, if you click on one of those and call them and you're like, hey, I'd really love to speak with Attorney Walter Hnot. I'd really like to work with him. We had a claimant do that. And then that law firm told them, okay, well, we'll try and set you up with that attorney. I don't even know if they knew what their attorney was that they were going to go ahead and, assimilate to that claim or whatever, or sync up with that claim. But anyways, they got synced up with an attorney, and then they were like, well, that's not the attorney I requested. And then basically they realized they got the wrong firm because they followed one of these advertisements. So as a heads up, these advertisements aren't me. They're just, they're part of the YouTube thing. So anyways, guys, I'm going to go ahead and call basically the first person who called in, because nobody rang me in that little bit of time right there. Let's get right to it. Here we go. And first person. As I'm clicking the button, somebody jumped in. All right, let me get this thing going. Okay, we are. Hi, can you hear me? This is Attorney Walter Hnot. Use a fake name. Would you like me to answer a specific question, or would you like me to run hearing questions with you? Oh, are you there?
Oh, is this me?
Yep, this is you, good sir. You are all set. We're putting the
All right.
volume way up.
All
How
right.
you doing?
I have a question. I'm on SSDI, okay?
Sure.
And I draw off my parents' deceased work record.
Sure.
I looked today online looking up Social Security just because of what's going on with the debt ceiling. It said you can never get married if you're drawing this like that. And I did not know that at all. I called Social Security in my local office, and they said, yeah, you can't get, you're not allowed to get married.
Well, there's a purposeful restriction on that, because when you get remarried, it essentially removes the protections of your parents over you, because then you have that established adult relationship where you will then be able to take from your spouse's benefits. But yeah, the point of disabled adult child is that you are a disabled child that became an adult, and you never, formed that bond with somebody else, that other adult person. So instead of you being able to tap into your wife's or your husband's, benefits, because you've never gotten married, you're still allowed to, tap into your parents' benefits.
The other thing is it said it would not be allowed to, or I'm wondering about, I was told, well, when you get to be 67 over, it's going to convert over to retirement. Now they're saying, no, yours will always be disabled. You're a special case. You will never convert over to retirement.
So here's the deal. The reason why yours is a little bit special, and it all falls under the same Title II base rules, is that you are receiving basically your traditional SSDI. Now, and look, here's the thing. These disabled adult child claims, they haven't had enough time to go ahead and collect their 40 quarters of coverage, right? So how many quarters of coverage do you have?
You mean as far as work history?
Yeah, like how many quarters of coverage do you have? I mean, if you don't know how many you have, that's fine too. No biggie.
I'm not off my deceased dad like that, but I did work a little bit when I was younger in my 20s, but I never could hold a job. So I had to see like a psychiatrist to get approved and everything. I just can't keep a job like that for some reason. I mean, and because of that, that's how I got the benefits and everything. So I know they'll let you go and work so much. You can do that. But the problem with that is if you go over a certain amount, they cut you off. And I was actually advised by a lawyer, I would not even try to work even if they let you work a few hours or whatever, because they could say if you're working 1 or 2 days, you can work. You're not disabled then. If you're disabled, you don't work at all. That's the deal. For ignore what you see about that you're allowed to, as long as you keep it under a certain amount of income. But I can't live on a little over $1,000 a month, and with this inflation and everything, and I thought everything would convert over into retirement. Not only that, I get the disability reviews that you get. Could I assume those disability reviews will continue? I mean, they will not end at 67. Like if I'm going to be 100 or whatever, or 90, I could still be reviewed for a disability and kicked off. I mean, or something. Or
no, I mean, you're going to get to a point where they're just not going to care anymore, because you're going to age out of it. And usually that's around 63, 64. I mean, they could continue it and they could change the rules. It used to be like so weird when they would investigate a 55-year-old. It used to be so weird when they would investigate a 58-year-old, and then a 59-year-old, and then a 60-year-old, 61-year-old, 62-year-old. They're slowly raising it up, but the bottom line is this: you're going to age out at some point. But keep in mind, you're going to stay under that combination program for that disabled adult child benefits. And the problem with your situation is that there are a lot of limitations on working put over your head, and as a result of that, every time that you work for more than like 3 or 4 months, they're going to go ahead and have the potential of a successful work attempt, as opposed to, you get fired after 2 or 3 months. It's a failed work attempt. So, I don't foresee them, when you're up in those upper age groups, really caring. But, remember, you also have a huge, massive advantage. Also, I want to say, April G, thank you so much for the super cool Fox. Thank you for the $5 donation. This is what I would say to you about that. You have to keep in mind that you're on like a machine at this point. Like go back 20 years, you weren't on a rotation on a machine, but you're on a calendar, you're on a timeline for when they're going to be doing them and repetitively doing them. But the main thing that you have that most people do not is that the rules and regulations of when you were found disabled are what apply going forward, which were probably pre 2017, which means the rules are much more in your favor. Everybody found disabled after 2017 has really crappy rules that apply to them retaining their disability benefits, which is why a lot of them, post 2017 can go through a CDR and, basically lose their benefits because the rules have changed so significantly. That's one of the sad things that, I look at this whole situation with me practicing disability law is that, if we continue in this direction, practicing disability law is financially not going to be viable for attorneys, and claimants are going to be constantly getting denied and constantly going through CDRs. Remember, this year, there's going to be more CDRs very likely than in the history of the entire SSA program for any particular year. Like this year is going to be likely over 1 million CDRs, which is just absolutely mind-boggling. That's mind-boggling,
Well, I had a CDR report that they mailed to me the last time. This was probably in May of 2018 or 2019. I know it was before 2020, and I mailed it back to them. They said, fine, we feel that your disability continues, unlabeled medical improvement, not likely or not expected. That's what it is, whatever the most severe case is.
Mm-hmm.
So we will contact you and contact you if we need to, whenever. When I look up online, it says between 5 and 7 years, especially my age, and also I'm going to be 60, like I said. But then some lawyers, if you look up their thing under who do Social Security, it'll say 7 years. Others say 5 to 7 years. Should I be looking for one of these forms sometime this year, or should I say I got another year or two before I get one in the mail to fill out?
So basically, there's 3 true levels where they do their CDR thing. And, one's like, essentially 6 months to a potential year. One's like around 3 years. And one's around 5 to 7 years. But the reality is the bona fide structure of rules as to exactly how much time, they're supposed to stick to this outline or whatever, but it could be 5 years. It could be 6 years. It could be 7 years. It could be it could be where they missed one where it was supposed to be every 3 years and they missed you for 2 years because they just didn't have enough staff to go ahead and do it. And now, boom, you're getting hit with 2 1-year ones. So, it could be just, lag where they put it off, or they didn't, have the resources, or the machine didn't, start to begin it. Now they had an internal error, whatever. But point is, if you're part of that category, 5 to 7 years is kind of the natural result. It used to be almost always 7+ years. Like we used to look at it as like a 7 to 10 year expansion, but now it's more like a 5 to 7 year.
So you err between, you'd expect 5 years, and then if it ends up being 6 or 7 years, then it could be that. But then again, if they get backlog, it might be 8 years or whatever. But at least be looking about 5 years. I mean,
yeah, but realize it's coming. It's like how old are you currently?
59. I'll be 60 May 20th.
All right, so you get a couple more years of this stuff, and then you're done with it.
Even if I'm still under my parents' SSDI, I thought as long as you have to keep proving you're disabled if you're getting that.
Yeah, but they're not
drawing under my one.
You hit 63, you hit 64. The likelihood of you getting a CDR at that point, it just dives. It dives in a massive way. It's just the interest is not there because the money it costs to investigate you is it's financially not worth it to them.
And the last question I have, I don't want to take up any more time, is this. I can't really live on what I'm getting. I got a friend who does real estate. He's trying to get me into doing that, saying you can make a lot of money. My fear is, let's say I get kicked off of SSDI. If I try to get back on again, I was told you may not be able to get back and draw up your parents' work record. They will say that claim is closed.
Yeah.
You would now have to draw up your meager work record that you worked for a few small jobs in your 20s, and I'd probably only get $20 a month then. I mean, because I didn't work hard. Is that really true? That that you probably will never get back on it again if you try that, if it's an attempt.
Yeah. So here's the deal. 2 things. A, you're going to mess up your reattachment for the DAC-based benefits, disabled adult child benefits. And B, you need to go research essentially non-countable income or non-countable unearned income, those types of categories right there. Because if you're looking to get some money, you have to make sure that money fits into those categories where they're not counting it against you for SGA purposes.
Okay, you mean like somebody tell me, like, if you win the lottery or something, that will not affect you if you win the lottery or something like that. If that's considered or if you rent out property, whatever it is, unearnable, whatever it is, the one that's there's two types of payment I know like that income. One is definitely like if I go get a job and work in a store, that's going to count against me, obviously. I mean, but there's others like passive income. Is that what you're talking about, like passive income?
So here's the thing. I've seen people win the lottery, and depending on what type of lottery it is and how you play it and what you do to be a part of it, it could be considered an earned income. Like things like this, like rent. Like if you get rent from somebody, that's supposed to be an unearned income. However, there are 3 caveats to that rule where it basically is considered income. We had a guy call in and ask me, hey, stocks, money from him, unearned income. Yes, true. Day trading, unearned income. Well, the statute says it's unearned income, but a court would look at that as earned income because you're sitting there working a job to buy and trade. So, look, what you got to do is research it and then figure out what you want to do, and then call call us, the attorneys, and then we'll kind of tell you what you're going to run into specifically with the judges. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Where would I start looking to Google for that? Like you were telling me, would just in general, I mean, or am I going to look up passive income or something? Or where am I going to say stuff that will not go against your Social Security that you're collecting? Is that what I should be narrow it down to?
Well, you could start that way. I think the better way to do it is, what are the 5 ways that you want to earn income? Then you look up the list of things that are considered non-earned income. Then you look up the exceptions to the non-earned income. Because some of these non-earned income can be converted into, non-countable income can be converted to countable income. And then you start to build your case as to why this is non-countable income, which is why you should be allowed to, obtain it. Oh, wow. Vedra, thank you for the $9.99 donation. I really appreciate it. Okay, so after this call, I'm going to do that question. So good, sir. Any additional questions for me? Yeah.
That's all I really need for tonight. Then thanks very much for your time. Then
thank you, good sir. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. And if you do pop up with an income that you're curious about, you're not sure about, make sure you call back in.
I will. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, good sir. Bye bye. So, Vedra, awesome question. So, I'm an adult disabled child on SSDI. My partner and I want to have a commitment ceremony and know that we cannot get legally married. So here's the thing about that stuff, and it's very tricky. Technically, the state retains sole possession of the capacity to say whether or not people are married. However, the SSA has a whole rule book on how they basically decide if people are like a couple within the zone of marriage, right? That's what it comes down to. So doing a ceremony, a commitment ceremony, would definitely, I mean, don't post pictures of that puppy online, but that would definitely put you within essentially the, if you were to do it, the zone of being married for the purposes of the SSA, for the purposes of, how they restrict benefits. So just be aware, you got to be extra careful with that, because if you're a DAC claim, you don't want to, you're going to start off this entire marriage, this entire commitment ceremony on a very, very salty note. So just please don't do that. Now, with that said, we missed a zillion calls right there. I'm just going to call basically, my goodness, a zillion calls. Here we go. Perfect. Let's call this one real quick. Let me get it rolling. Here we go. Okay, good.
Hello.
Hi, this is Attorney Walter Hnot. We are live on YouTube. Remember to use a fake name throughout this process. Also, would you like me to answer a specific question, or would you like me to run hearing questions with you?
I kind of have a couple questions. Just real quick, because I actually found you off your video about the disability system being based in eugenics, off of something a gentleman told me that I volunteer with at a garden.
Well, I never
So,
said eugenics, but
what that?
I never said the word eugenics, but I'm not saying it's not based off of some of those principles, but I didn't use that word because of what that word means, but I will say
Well,
this.
correct.
Yeah. So yeah, go ahead though. Yeah.
But I just have a question about the whole surveillance topic. So,
Yeah.
is there some kind of like hidden fine print or something like that where they're able to basically say that there's no way you could like argue that they're violating constitutional protections against anything? Like,
Well, in that, yeah, that's the point. That's like the thing is that where do we draw the line on people being able to live a free life? You know what I mean? Like, what does the Constitution promise us? How have we changed that over time? What has been written to reduce our rights over time to make it more narrow and specific so that we can't, have as much of a free farm life or whatever? And where does it cross the line? Where do we say we don't want drones that are investigating us to be flying overhead? Where do we say we don't want police to be able to use special tracking devices without a warrant? Where is that line? And that's more criminal law stuff. And now you guys know the technology they're using. I should probably bring on a criminal law attorney to talk about essentially the investigation practices from a legal standpoint as to what they can get away with.
okay, yeah, that's because I mean, living in New York too, the police here are not exactly the most squeaky clean. That they're often caught doing quite criminal things, and even just little stuff like covering up their license plates to avoid speed cameras, all that kind of stuff. But qualified immunity kind of prevents that from becoming an issue.
Well, remember, you hit it right on the head there. I mean, the nail was just smashed into the wood. You got it right 100%. What you're saying is, and look, I understand they're not the epitome of of genuine above reproach individuals, but the whole reason CDRs at the level at which they are done with these CDI investigations, right? The continuing disability reviews where they're hiring these investigators and all that stuff. The reason this is so aggressive is because of the amount of fraud that occurred from the police department and the fire department from the whole 9/11 scam. A lot of the people who said that they were there pulling out bodies when they weren't there pulling out bodies, or the people said, oh, it was terrible. I hurt my back really bad when I fell. And then they've got pictures of them online, with jet skis. That's it. New York is the seminal birthplace for some of the most aggressive reasons that we have these CDRs today.
Yeah, and it's funny too about the 9/11 thing because I keep seeing in the news, and every couple months there's like some politician or celebrity that we find like that they had some kind of fraudulent claim that they said like, oh, my mother died in 9/11 or my aunt or something like that.
Right.
It's absolutely wild how played out that whole thing is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, they're trying to, they're trying to. All right, the way society works when it comes to creating a system that can control the interests of people is that you have to play the victim, and then you have to, after playing the victim, play the part of basically somebody who promises great things. And then after you promise great things, you then have to say, well, we need to control the bad people. And then once you start to control the bad people, you gain control to control everything. And then when you can control everything, you end up literally in every single horrific, monstrous, regime of total control, empirical control. Russia, Germany, China, all these extreme government control situations. And the sad thing is that it's taking advantage of people who want you to do well to then control the outcome of what their future actions will be. And look, as you guys have probably noticed, I'm a pretty anti-government type of person. Okay, I don't trust the government like a lot of people do that I know that are like, why would the government do that? When they pull that, I'm just sitting there like, it's a face palm for me. Like, and it's, look, the government is required to lie by law. Let me say that again. The government is required to lie by law. The government is required to surveil us by law. Once again, the government is required to surveil us by law. The government has special rules and regulations, which the court systems have not caught up to yet, which allow them to do searches that are beyond our expectations of privacy by law. This is all because of this. Well, we had the war stuff with 9/11, and who do we trust, and who's going to attack us, and what's our true interest as a country, and how do we protect ourselves, etc. But at the end of the day, people don't have a constitution that they can really rely on like they could 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. If you were to have somebody like Martin Luther King born and doing what he was doing back then today, his civil rights movement today, he would not be successful. And that's the sad part of the America we live in. And the worst puppets are not the American people. A lot of them are ignorant, sure. A lot of them lack education on it, sure. A lot of them need, basically an understanding. They need to be shown a direction. They need help. But they're not the puppets. The puppets are the politicians. The politicians are the ones who literally control the votes. They control the votes because they can go ahead and change what is the thing that dictates to us what's going to happen. And we set it all up on a system that just you got to have money. You got to have big money to get elected. Right. And there might be one-off where, it took a little bit of money to beat somebody with big money. There might be one of those. But 99% of the time, you need big money. You know why I'm not a politician? Because I don't have money like that. I don't have money like that, and I can't afford to get elected. I can't. A lot of people know my name. The channel's got 75,000 subscribers almost at this point. But let me assure you, I am not electable. Because the special interests, I've talked too much shit about too many of them, and as a result of that, they're not going to pay for me to be in office. So,
yeah, that was really good, and that definitely answered, exactly my sentiment, my thought, and I share your sentiment about the whole, like being anti-government and all that stuff, and the thing that comes to mind is that it was a book I've been told about, but I've never read, called Ordinary Men, that was about how, I think it was the people that worked in the Soviet gulags how they went from being like just a normal person that goes home and hugs their children every night, but they're doing these absolute atrocities while they're at work. And I always say to my friends or anybody that the most terrifying person on the planet is somebody who works for the government who just, quote, does their job without thought,
Well, and you brought up a good point, and the gulags were certainly horrific. And the only reason the gulags were not brought forward more was because Russia was a part of the winning side of World War II. But, their master race plans where they would combine genetics with gorillas, very similar in combination and contrast to basically, the horrible things that were done in World War II by Hitler and all of his henchmen. And, you got to remember, I come from the people, Ashkenazi Jewish person, which basically means, a German, Jew. And what that means is that I come from the people and the scientists and the knowledgeable and the very, I come from the people who are essentially tortured by ordinary citizens. And you know who okayed that? The brightest people in Germany okayed that. And when the brightest people in Germany okay something, they can get those who are uneducated or even those who have lesser education to go ahead and follow their bidding. And the problem with that is that at the end of the day, if there wasn't an America to go in there and kick ass, everything would be very, very different. Africa would be very different. Europe would be very different. If there was no America, imagine it's not there. We just had Canada. Imagine that. It's weird, right? We got no America, but we got a Canada. That just feels wrong. But imagine that. That war would have come out completely differently. And at the end of the day, right, you would have not had any of, you wouldn't have me. I wouldn't be around. I wouldn't be around in this situation. They would have gotten rid of me, But bottom line is you are correct. And one of the things that I don't think a lot of people realize, in the Russians, one of the biggest atrocities they committed was actually against the German people directly at the end of World War II, when their military men were basically going after and unfortunately, sexually abusing the German women that were left from all the men that had basically gone to war, been captured, been killed, etc. So one of the most atrocious things that came from World War II, yes, the Holocaust, but also what the Russians did to the German women. There are not a lot of, German people of today that do not have some sort of Russian genetic influence because of, the massive rapes that occurred. But, you look through history, China China and their early wars, I mean, way back, way back before the true imperial, right? When you just had, your kings as opposed to the empire, right? Those were some of the most grotesque, absolutely horrific government workers, right? Because that's what the military is, the government workers doing atrocious things to regular people.
Yeah, that's, and it's wild to see kind of, and because even, I deal with a lot of hostility from government employees on a daily basis, because right now I'm going through the homeless shelter system through the DHS in New York. And it's wild to me even still, like how sometimes, even if people are giving the workers a hard time, like they seem to forget that these people are also having an incredibly hard time themselves. And, many of these people are just, they need a lot of help, and it's just a lot of times not there because of the way these systems work. I mean, even now I've been getting strung along by the HRA in New York for over 3 weeks, and I was literally told by the employee who was helping me the last time I went there that it's because of the amount of migrants that are here.
Yeah.
They're just so swamped. They literally cannot process anything. It's actually taking longer than it's legally allowed to by the design of the system.
So let me tell you one last final thing. I had a guy call me basically today who essentially wanted to go ahead and do a documentary series on how the disabled have had a very anti-triumphant experience with trying to deal with the law, try to get past things. And what we talked about were who are the current heroes of this field, of getting people with, disabilities, retired rights, promoting it, awareness, pushing agendas, winning bills that become law, etc., etc. So I gave him a bunch of names, a bunch of ideas to do. Bottom line is this, though. The disabled, and this is the same talk I had with him, have always been at a disadvantage. No matter what you throw at me, they've always been at a disadvantage. You can say they're more abled in different ways. You can say this, you can say that, whatever. But the disabled have always been at a strategic disadvantage when it comes to the law. And here's why. Whenever a caveat has to be carved out of something, you have the general rule, and then you have to create these little caveats, right? This thing for these people, this thing for those people, this thing for that person, right? The disabled have always fit into the requirement for a caveat. So the disabled have always come second when it comes to creating law. That is just by design of how our legal system works. And inherent with that, the disabled dealing with anxiety, frustration, fear, survival, starvation, all these functional limitations end up, unfortunately, not having the mental capacity to actually figure out how it works. So they live in this quasi place, this quasi land of knowledge. Like, it could work this way. I think it works that way. If they were ethical towards me, it would work this way. If I'm a good person, they won't touch me, right? That's what their mindset is. And that is the main functional problem with our legal system and how we approach civil rights towards the disabled, which is that it always takes more work to create the caveat, which usually comes later down the line. And also, the disabled are not capable of doing the representation that they need that other groups of people can. Think about it. Non-disabled people, whether it's by gender, right? Male versus female. Whether it's by race, right? Caucasians, African Americans, indigenous people, Native Americans, Latinos, Asians, whatever. Do any of those groups have a limitation that would, cause them a disabling advantage, right? That they wouldn't be at the same footing? No, because women, intelligence, same thing as men. All the races, same thing across the board. Sure, you have different people. Some are brighter than others. Sure. But across the board, you will find the same intelligence capacity across the board. You look at the highest IQs, they all have a different skin color. And that's a beautiful thing. That's a really cool thing. But the disabled are always inherently at a disadvantage. And that's why they're always last in line. And that is why the number one benefit that's likely to be chop blocked and hurt and injured, because they won't have the capacity to defend themselves properly. And let's call it like it is. Disability attorneys make some of the least amount of money out of most attorneys, right? You look at like the personal injury king, right? The most attorneys, the biggest law firm, the personal injury king, the slip and fall car crash king versus the biggest disability attorney, right? The biggest car crash guy is billions. The biggest disability guy isn't even close to 100 million. So just to frame it, just to understand it, The system is designed to fail for these people, not just in the sense of those who are disabled, but also their representatives.
Right, yeah, and that's absolutely my experience because, you know, I'm disabled myself. I have, I'm about to get hopefully positive diagnosis for genetic connective tissue disorder. I have a lot of signs of fibromyalgia, all kinds of stuff as a side effect. And it's like, I've had issues with insurance and also really crappy doctors when I was outside of New York and Pennsylvania, where I'm from, in a rural area, which, you know, that's a whole other discussion, is rural medicine versus city medicine quality. But that I literally had doctors just look at me and go, "You're too young to have problems," and just walk out of the appointment. And it's like, you know, and then Social Security is like, "Oh, well, you don't have anything documented." It's like, well, because doctors won't document things, you know. But now I'm good. You know, in New York, my doctors are listening and all that. So.
One thing that's going to be very interesting coming up over the next 30 years is essentially technology increases in medicine and whether or not we give a damn enough to use them to help the disabled. And at what point will the technology surpass the impairment? Meaning the disability will cease to exist because the medication or the surgery or the medical treatment in general is able to fix, cure, whatever word you want to use. But the bottom line is 30 years from now, a lot of those things are going to change. Now, we'll have new problems. We'll have new issues. We'll have new impairments. We'll have new injuries. Sure. But when we get to self-sustaining pods that have the capacity to do surgery on humans, where you don't even need a doctor to be present and they can cure most things, or scanning machines that are able to eliminate cancerous cells before they ever really grow into something problematic, that's going to be interesting because our cost of disability to this nation will significantly reduce. And when that happens, then you got to ask yourself, will the disabled be more of a minority then than they are now? And if they're more of a minority in the future where there's not as many of them, how are their rights going to do? Will they suffer, improve? What do you think?
It's really interesting. I'd have to really, really think about that. I'm actually about to dig into a book I checked out of the library today about vulnerable populations in the United States. So I'll have to think about that while I'm looking through this book. That's really interesting.
Excellent. Well, good, sir. You have a wonderful, wonderful night. I'm going to probably go ahead and head to bed because I'm super duper tired. I'm going to wake up early, but I will catch you later. You guys have a wonderful, wonderful night. I want to thank specifically the person who just did a donation, Philip Price. Thank you. Thank you so much for the $9.99 donation. Good sir, on the phone. I will catch you later. And everybody tonight, you have a wonderful, wonderful night. And please be safe. Please hug your doggies. Please kiss your cats. And remember, life is good. Let's keep pushing. All right, I'll catch you later, guys. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.